Welcome to everyone joining in from all over the world. Before I start, I just really wanted to thank Scott for all his dedicated work to putting this conference together, both in its in real life form and its modified virtual form. It's really nice to touch base with everyone despite how crazy everything is. Today, I want to talk to you about how to use analytics to address the impacts of the pandemic on your workforce. And what does this mean, and what are the things that we do? So, what this talk will entail is I'm going to start with a very quick overview to level set all of us on what is people analytics and how is it used. And then I'll be talking about the different projects that the People Analytics group is doing to address COVID-19. They include things like figuring out how the employee population is really feeling, what do they need, what do we have to do for returning to the office, and how is the business going to change, and how can we support change in the business. But before I get to any of this, I have to give a huge thank you to my amazing team. Work is never done alone, but it's triply true in this case. My team is just incredible, and without them, none of this work would be possible. So let's start. Let's begin with the People Analytics primer. So we all know what people are. We're all people. It's something, we all know that word. And by your presence at this conference, I would assume that you all know and understand the power of analytics. But what about when you put those two words together? What is people analytics? Well, the terminology really was first used widely at Wharton, and they used it to describe the data-driven approach to managing people at work. It's grown tremendously in the past about 10 years. There's a giant people analytics conference at Wharton, but there's many other conferences or parts of conferences where people meet to talk about this topic. There's journals and publications, there's computational resources, all kinds of online classes. It's even entered the mainstream media through podcasts. So it's really taken hold and started growing. A lot of companies, especially large companies, have people analytics teams. Some smaller companies will contract out to a consultant for specific people analytics issues. Some companies use the Center of Excellence model. University programs now exist to train people in this field. So it's really growing and really taking deep roots in all our different ways that we're educated. Some of the other terms that you may have heard that describe people analytics are workforce analytics or talent intelligence, but no matter what you call it, what prompted it? Well, first of all, there's a declining return on the investment that is made in the workforce, and companies wanted to understand how to get back a better return on their investment. Secondly, there's increased competition for talent, particularly in certain areas or key skills where there's a lack of availability. Most people on this call will be familiar with that because analytics happens to be one of those areas where there's a little bit of a shortage. And finally, we really have a lot of data about our employees, and we know a lot more about them than we actually think. So why not use that for good? So I always like to mention that there's two sides to people analytics, and that we're working both to help the employees and the employers. So on the employee side, one of the coolest things to me is to think about how many people I can impact with people analytics finding. And the reason that this is so awesome is about 90% of the population will have a job in their lifetime. So if you can discover something that makes a job better, you're impacting a giant number of people. So that's just cool. The other key metric to note is that you spend approximately a third of your lifetime at work. So anything we can do to make that third of your life better, it's definitely a huge payoff for an employee. And even though in the end you might be judged on the technical aspects of your work and what you delivered, there's a lot more that we want to think about, and that's the physical and mental health of the employee, their engagement, their enjoyment on the job, and these are all things that we work to improve in people analytics. On the employer's side, um, part of the reason this area is growing so quickly is that what we really know about work and the way people work is changing, and it's changing very quickly. And in the last few months, it's changing probably the quickest it ever has. So having this data and this way to study what's going on is great. Just a couple of examples. Employers might not know, hey, what skills do I actually have in my workforce and what do I really need? That's come up a lot, and I'll talk more about it in a little while as one of the things we're doing to look at the impacts of COVID. Secondly, there's been a huge change in how people work and how long they stay at jobs. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average time people stay in a job is about 4.5 years, but this number is greatly reduced for the younger generations, for people between the ages of 25 and 34. It's dropped down to only about 3 years. So employers really want to look at the cost of recruiting and ramping and how do we get that down, and how do we keep that valuable organizational knowledge in the company as long as we can. Some of the things that different people analytics groups study: diversity and inclusion, it's a huge one. Retention, as I mentioned previously. Monitoring the organizational health, looking at the managers and leaders and trying to assess how they're doing and offer improvement plans. Workforce planning overall, how is your business going to grow or change and where? Career growth, career movement, looking at promotions and transfers. This is a huge area. Teams is a personal area that I do a ton of work in, particularly with trying to understand how teams best work together when they're not sitting in the same place. It's become even more relevant these days, but it was always something that I was interested in. Learning and development plans, skills, as I mentioned already, and there's a lot of focus now on benefits and wellness plans. And if you're trying to get people analytics going, I would pose the question to you: which of these things are most important to your organization, and how might you bring a plan forward to use analytics to address making positive changes in these areas? Okay, so let's talk about people analytics and responding to COVID-19. So one of the things about working at Salesforce is that our leadership came out immediately and said, look, we've founded our company on these core values, and the plan that we make to move forward in this pandemic is going to stick with these core values. And any company that does that is going to survive. So figuring out what your core values are is really a big thing. For Salesforce, it's trust, customer success, innovation, and equality. And now, in this time, I just want to point out that there's a lot of economic uncertainty, and there's a lot of things that might happen. And as we think about how to use analytics, we kind of have to have multiple plans or multiple directions that we can go with a plan based on what happens with the economy. So it could be that it's V-shaped, that we have this drop, which we're in now, but then we very quickly turn around. This would surprise most people, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. Um, Increasingly likely, it seems that we might drop and stay in a down for a little while and then turn around and come back. Um, it's possible that we could stay in the down for quite a long time and be in more of an L shape. Um, the the one thing that a lot of economists are saying is that we're probably going to have a combination of some fast and some slow recoveries. So there's a lot of different ways that things can go. Everyone has a different opinion on what's going to happen. Everyone has a different opinion on how to act. Sometimes people have the same person has multiple opinions on the same day. So what do you do? How do you try and even respond to this? So what Salesforce has done is they've put together as many resources as they can, their customers, employees, partners, experts, and the community to come up with the response initiative. Now, where my job in people analytics comes in is the employees, the Salesforce employees. That's my customer. And trying to listen to them and figure out how to incorporate their thoughts, their needs, their ideas into our response initiatives. The biggest thing we're trying to do is resiliently respond to the crisis, and figure out what's the path to the next normal when we're not even sure what that is, what is next normal. So the way we're doing this is taking a very structured approach through 3 tracks. The first track is to stabilize the company. The second track is to reopen. So we're between tracks 1 and 2 in the world right now. And then finally, to grow and accelerate change and growth in whatever that next normal is going to be. So let's look at each of these 3 tracks and think about what's the people analytics path? What's people analytics doing in each of these tracks? So the first track was stabilizing operations. We sent everyone home. Salesforce was one of those tech companies that sent everyone home early at the beginning of March. It was less complicated for us than for some other companies because approximately 20% of the company works from home regularly, like myself. I'm a signed remote employee. But for a lot of people, it was a shock. So what did we need to do to help stabilize? Well, the first thing we did is figure out what do employees need or want to be productive, engaged, and healthy at home. So we quickly put together surveys and started collecting data on what is your home situation? What are your needs in terms of equipment, in terms of Wi-Fi? What are your added stressors? Do you have kids that you're trying to watch? Do you have adult parents that you're trying to watch? Are you far away from your family? What are your workloads? Are they more or less or the same? Trying to figure out, get a pulse on what's going on. So we have that data survey. We took all those results, compared it to how people were feeling in the previous survey, which in our case, we had run in early January. We run it every 6 months. We also have a bunch of internal message boards where people could post comments and ideas about how things were going at home. We took all those comments and applied some topic models to understand what was top in people's minds. And we also have the employee demographics. We know where the employees are. We know who is in a more irregular working situation and who is in a more normal working situation. So we put all that information together and we created some targeted solutions. So I think one of the most surprising things that happened here is that we all knew it was incredibly difficult for the people with kids to manage the virtual learning while working. And it was particularly true for the leaders because they happened to be of the age where they had kids at home. The thing that people didn't really realize is how much of our population is single, relatively young, and living alone in a city far away from their family or any other kind of support network. And the sort of stress that that was putting on them. They had fears about getting sick and who's going to take care of me, and being so far away from their families and unable to help their families if they needed help. So this was a huge learning for us. Another thing we learned is the desperate situation in India. They just don't have the same kind of Wi-Fi connection and power grid that we have in the United States. So we put all this stuff together. We were able to inform managers. We could put together some well-being plans for people that were alone and isolated. And we were able to reorganize workloads for people so that in India, for example, they would be doing less work online and other groups would cover them. So we had to change some of our support models, but we were able to do that because we were aware of the situation. And then the other thing is that we made a choice to communicate and over communicate, because you can over communicate and people can choose to ignore you. But if you under communicate and there's nowhere for people to go that need information, this is a very negative situation. Okay, so step 2, the reopening phase. We're not there yet. I think last week we started to reopen the office in Korea, the very first office that'll open. Soon a couple of the other offices in Asia will begin to reopen. This is going to take a ton of planning, a lot of work, following local laws, following the needs of the people. So there's a lot of questions to answer. First, who needs to be in the office? Second, what do they need to feel safe? Third, given the choice, who might be returning to the office? How do we answer that question? Well, first, we have the show up rates. We have that data. We know the sort of traffic patterns of people prior to COVID. So we could look at that as a base trend line. Second, we have all the information about commutes. We have people's zip codes or country area codes so that we know how far away they are from the office and have an idea of what their commutes are. And then third, we have information about, do they have family responsibilities that might bar them from returning to the office? Also, what about working from home? How are people feeling about that? How are managers feeling about that? These are all questions that we either have some data, can collect data, or can put together a sketch of what's going on. One of the ways this is done is that we have been working over the last year actually to develop employee personas, which talk about who works where and when. So some of our personas are Janitha sits home as a work from home employee, has a lot of meetings with people in all different time zones. So she might be working very early or very late, or off in the middle of the day, but her persona is work from home. We have like a salesperson persona that they're almost never in the office, but they're always on the go. They're always out visiting customers. And then we have some personas of people that are always in the office. They go in every day and they stay on the same floor. other people go in every day and go to many different buildings and floors. So using the personas we'd built prior to COVID, we were able to get an idea of how some spaces might be scheduled in a way that we could adhere to social distance laws. We also could start to think about shifts. Who does the kind of work that needs to be covered around the clock? Who doesn't? What can we do about shifting people's work to give them time to watch their kids but still get their work done? What can we do about shifting people's time so that they have Wi-Fi access at a time where it's more available? We also are thinking about a lot of work having to do with contact tracing. How can we manage the information about the people that do come into the office so that if someone is sick, they can understand who needs to be contacted? And then finally, all the analytics that go with the health checks and the other type of information that are needed for returning to work. So it's a pretty interesting set of data. Some of the data is about your surrounding area and is collected from places like Johns Hopkins in the United States or other health places in Europe or in Asia. Some of it is information about your workforce and where they are and where they need to be. And then all of these things get combined together to make a decision. And this is the basis for a new product of Salesforce called work.com. And the interesting thing about it is that to this point, people analytics has not had much to do with any of the products in Salesforce beyond managing the people who work on the products. Now we've had some direct involvement with the products because we are being asked questions that our customers are asking us, like, how are you going to manage this? How are you doing that? So it's been a very interesting shift in mindset for the people analytics team. Okay, so the third track, the grow phase, finding the new normal and thriving in it. There's some major questions here. What jobs are going to be eliminated? What jobs are no longer useful? What jobs need to be totally reimagined? And what new jobs are going to emerge? And I'm sure everyone can think in their own company of these. For their reimagining, just imagine marketing, or even imagine Informs. Who would have thought that the people that work for Informs would all of a sudden need the skill of being able to throw a virtual conference? There's a lot of new things going on in that kind of job. Jobs that might be eliminated are jobs having to do with certain kind of sales that aren't happening. Jobs that have to do with interacting with people face to face all the time. Those people might need to shift to something else. And we can imagine that there's going to be totally new kinds of jobs. I'm sure that eventually every company will want to have a chief health officer now. Who would have thought that? So there's a lot going on, and this is the imagining phase. And the thing that I want to say about this is that we have absolutely no idea what's coming. So how do we prepare? Well, one of the ways is by taking inventory of what we have and trying to understand how what we have can be used. So we've got to look at what are the skills of our employees. So basically, we want to create a skills taxonomy or skills library. Why? Well, even before this, the skills you need at work are changing all the time, often very quickly. There's a very high demand and shortage of some very critical skills that's only going to get more extreme as time goes on. The future is even more uncertain, and we want to really mitigate this by having a wide range of skills and by employing people that have skills that can be adapted to new and emerging areas. Some of the goals in creating a taxonomy is identify how are skills changing over time, what clusters of skills are needed to be successful in particular jobs, what environment is best suited for success given certain skills. And this is definitely something we've thought about even before this, like what are the skills that work best for people who are working at home? And what skills are best for people who are in the office interacting with people all the time? And then personally, one of the things I always push for in the skills area is help an employee find their next role and grow into their career. Like if they say, I know I want to be this position when I grow up, how can I look at the skills they have now and help them figure out what skills they need to add to really grow into that next job? So one of the things we've been doing is building a master skills list for Salesforce. We took a combination of 3 open skills lists from LinkedIn, from ONET, the government list, and from MC, which if you don't know about MC, I highly recommend you check them out. They're doing all kinds of interesting things in this area. And then taking some matching with close to 40,000 Salesforce job requisitions and about 3 million resumes of people that applied for these jobs, and doing some keyword searches and matching and putting together a big list, then doing a little bit of manual reviewing and relabeling. Like all things that are smart, it also requires a human in the loop. And from this, we've come up with a master skills list that has close to 8,000 skills. And we're still curating and we're still working on getting that number down. But it's pretty exciting that we've gotten to this point. How are we using it? Well, first of all, if there's an open role internally, we can look for candidates internally that have skills in their current job that are similar to the skills needed to do the open job, and then help the candidate move around. And it really helps to bolster the internal mobility that a lot of companies want, and that help mitigate some of those risks where people don't become so specialized in one area that then if something changes, there's nothing else they can do. We also have used the skills taxonomy to do a supply and demand gap analysis, including geographical information to understand what skills do we have in certain locations, what skills are we not finding in certain locations, and how can we better set things up, or what do we need to do in order to bridge that gap. And then finally, we've also used the skills as a way to set up a better internal network for people, to help them find other people in the company that are doing things that might be of interest to them, but that they might never meet otherwise. This area is really a huge area that we're preparing for big changes that are going to be coming from COVID. And so some of the ongoing work or the aspirational work is we want to understand how similar or unlike two skills are. So if I am very proficient in skill A, how hard is it for me to pick up skill Q? And knowing this can then the company quickly reskill one group of people to meet a brand new search. Second of all, we want to, right now we just have a sort of 0-1 of do you have a skill or not. We want to start incorporating levels of skill or competency with that skill to understand how, if you're an expert, how much expertise can you get from learning, or do you need to get that from on the job? How long does it take on the job to ramp a person to expert? How does that all work? Um, Looking at skills clusters is always big a big thing, because sometimes if you have people that have multiple skills, that can easily transfer to another skill where there's a shortage. We're working on increasing the understanding of hard and soft skills, and most importantly, we are looking at collecting skills at the individual level. Right now we have it at the job level, but we don't have it necessarily for the individuals. Okay, so some conclusions and takeaways. Um, I hope that you got the idea that people analytics is a very fast growing area of interest. It's of increasing value to employers. It's incredibly interesting and exciting, and you can really have a giant impact both on your company and on individuals. Many of the analytic skills that you're using right now can directly be applied to workforce data. A lot of the things that are advertised or that people ask you to do, you can just turn around and apply that to workforce data. The data might look different, might have different bounds, might have no bounds, but it's there, and the work that you can do on it is not complicated, but it really can help leaders make very important decisions about what to do. And in this time of the pandemic and trying to quickly understand and pivot and make choices to help the company and the employees at the same time, it can be invaluable. Um, the other thing is that thinking about where do I fit in these three tracks, there's a role for people analytics in each of them. Track one, the stabilized track, we're still in it. Your company might still need help figuring out how to help people hunker down for what might be the rest of the year, working from home. What do they need? How can you help them? What was their situation before? How different is it now? Secondly, how can you help create these return to the office plans? What do you know about your employees and the way that they work? And how does this fit with or not fit with the situation that your local laws or the federal laws, the state laws, or whatever they are asking for? It's pretty interesting because when they talked about what it might be like in the office at Salesforce when we return, I think personally it doesn't sound that fun. But one of the things that I love that we might keep forever is we might have tickets to take the elevator. So you might have an assigned elevator time with a ticket. And that sounds amazing, because one of the biggest complaints that employees had before was the situation with the elevators. They just, at certain times, it was so awful and you were waiting a long time and it was very uncomfortable. So I told someone on the reopening committee that they might need to plan to have these elevator tickets from here on out, because people are going to fall in love with that. They're not going to love getting their temperature taken every day, but they're going to love not having to wait for the elevator. And then third, as we move through this and start reimagining and rethinking things, how do we adapt and grow to what the new normal is going to be? How do we help people shift and change and become engaged in new things and figure out how to use their skills in new and interesting ways? There's just so much there, and there's so much that we can do to help both your employees and your employers make a huge difference. So thanks. I really appreciate your time. I hope that I've given you some good ideas of things to try out or things to talk over with your teams. I'm happy to take questions now. I'm incredibly happy to meet with people offline. You can find me easily on LinkedIn. I'm happy to exchange emails there, messages, or we can even set up a time to talk. I'm sorry that we can't all just be in person to chat, but I really look forward to the day that we can. Thank you.